You know, one of the biggest reasons people never reach the level of success they dream about isn't because they're not talented enough. Not because they're lazy, and not because the world is unfair. It's because they simply don't know how to listen. They talk too much. They defend themselves too quickly. They argue, they explain, they justify, they fill every silent space with noise. But success, real, deep, transformative success, doesn't grow in noise. It grows in silence. It grows in the moments when you stop trying to prove you're right and start trying to learn what's true. Think about it. Every master, every legend, every great leader, they all had one common trait before they became great. They learned how to listen. When you listen, you open yourself up to growth. When you talk too much, you close yourself off. The loudest person in the room rarely learns anything new, but the quiet one, the one observing, paying attention, absorbing lessons from every word, every mistake, every experience, that person evolves. You've probably met people who always need to get the last word in, right? They'll argue even when they're wrong because their ego can't handle silence. And yet those same people often stay stuck. They don't progress because they've built a wall of words between themselves and wisdom. You see, when you talk, you're repeating what you already know. But when you listen, you might learn something that could change everything. That's how success works. It rewards the humble learners, not the arrogant talkers. I remember once sitting with a mentor early in my career, someone whose achievements I deeply admired. I was eager, excited, bursting with ideas, and I couldn't stop talking. I told him all about my goals, my plans, my frustrations, my big dreams. He listened quietly for a while, nodding, smiling occasionally, and then he said something that hit me like a lightning bolt. "You can't fill a cup that's already full." I sat there in silence, realizing he was right. I was that full cup, overflowing with my own noise. I was so busy talking that I wasn't actually listening to the person who could help me get to where I wanted to go. That day I made a promise to myself. I'd start listening more than I talked. And that one decision changed everything. Listening is not about being quiet. It's about being intentional. It's about being present. It's about understanding that every moment, every conversation, every silence holds something valuable if you're willing to receive it. But here's the problem. Most people confuse hearing with listening. Hearing is passive. Listening is active. Hearing means sound went into your ears. Listening means wisdom went into your soul. When you truly listen, you don't just hear the words. You hear the meaning behind them, the emotion beneath them, the experience that shaped them. Listening is how you pick up the small lessons life hides in everyday moments. It's how you see what others miss. It's how you grow faster than those who just talk. Look at the most successful people in any field. Entrepreneurs, athletes, artists, scientists, and you'll see a pattern. They all have mentors. They all learn from others. They all ask questions and then they listen with full attention. They understand something powerful. Listening shortens the learning curve. Why take 10 years to learn something through mistakes when you can learn it in 10 minutes from someone who's already done it? But to receive that kind of wisdom, you have to shut your mouth and open your mind. The world rewards the ones who can listen in a world where everyone wants to talk. Because when everyone's shouting for attention, the one who listens quietly becomes the one everyone wants to talk to. There's a certain calm power in being the listener. You become magnetic. People trust you. They feel heard, understood, valued. And in return, you gain something priceless, perspective. You start to see patterns others miss. You start to notice truths hidden between words. You start to make decisions not from emotion, but from clarity. Listening is not weakness. It's strength disguised as silence. It's the discipline of the wise. It's the tool of the strategic. It's the language of those who win quietly. You can't build success while defending your ego every time someone gives feedback. You can't grow if you already think you know everything. The humble ones, the ones who listen, reflect, adjust, they move forward quietly, while the talkers stay busy impressing others with their noise. It's funny, silence is uncomfortable for most people. They rush to fill it because it feels awkward. But silence is where insight lives. That quiet pause in a conversation, that's the space where growth enters. When you stop reacting and start observing, you give wisdom a chance to speak. And sometimes what you hear in silence is louder than any words could ever be. So ask yourself this: when was the last time you really listened? Not just nodded while waiting for your turn to talk, but truly listened. To your mentor, to your parents, to your gut, to life itself. Life is always speaking, through challenges, through failures, through people who cross your path. But most people are too busy talking about their problems to hear the solutions life is whispering. You'll start finding success the moment you start respecting silence. Because silence doesn't mean nothing's happening, it means something powerful is growing. Like a seed beneath the soil, unseen but unstoppable. Every time you choose to listen instead of react, you plant another seed of wisdom. And one day, those seeds will bloom into results that will make all the noise in the world unnecessary. The truth is, people remember the ones who make them feel heard, not the ones who never stop talking. Great leaders aren't great because they command attention. They're great because they give it. They know how to create space for others to share, to express, to contribute. And in that space, new ideas are born. That's how innovation happens. Not in shouting matches, but in moments of thoughtful listening. So if you want to rise in your career, if you want to build better relationships, if you want to attract the right people and opportunities, start mastering the art of listening. Stop interrupting. Stop assuming. Stop planning what you'll say next while the other person is still talking. Just listen. Be fully there. Because that's when life gives you the clues you've been missing. Listening is like tuning a radio. You can't catch the right frequency if they're static. You have to adjust the dial, clear the noise, and then clarity. The same goes for success. Clear your mental noise. Stop broadcasting and start tuning in. Success has a sound, and you can only hear it when you're quiet enough to listen. You know, the more I began to practice listening, the more I realized how much I had been missing all along. It's almost like walking into a room you thought you knew, and suddenly the lights turn on and you realize there's so much detail, color, and meaning that was always there, but you were too distracted to see it. Listening does that. It turns the lights on. It lets you see what life has been trying to show you all along. But let me be honest. Learning to listen wasn't easy for me, because silence feels unnatural at first, especially when you've spent years trying to prove yourself, to be heard, to make people take you seriously. We live in a world where everyone wants attention, where success is often confused with volume. The loudest voice gets the spotlight, the biggest statement gets the clicks. But that's not where real success grows. Real success grows in depth, in understanding, and you only reach that by listening. I started observing the difference between people who talk to be noticed and people who listen to understand, and I saw something profound. The talkers attract attention for a moment, but the listeners attract respect for a lifetime. The talkers make noise, but the listeners make impact. Because when you truly listen, people can feel it. They sense that you're not just hearing words, you're hearing them. And that changes everything. Listening creates trust. It builds bridges. It softens conflict. It opens doors that force an argument never could. Have you ever been in an argument where both sides keep talking over each other? Nothing moves. No one learns. No one wins. But the moment one person stops to listen, really listen, the energy shifts. Suddenly there's space for understanding. And understanding is the foundation of every success story, in business, in relationships, in personal growth. Listening is also how you learn faster. I remember reading about Warren Buffett, one of the greatest investors of all time, who spends most of his day just reading and listening, not talking, not broadcasting, not boasting, just learning quietly. He once said, "The more you learn, the more you earn." But learning starts with listening. When you're in a room with people smarter than you, listen. When you're with people less experienced than you, still listen. Because everyone knows something you don't. That's the beauty of listening. It makes you a student of life, and life rewards those who keep learning. I'll tell you something powerful. When you stop talking so much, you stop wasting energy defending your limitations. You stop saying, "I can't," or "that's not possible," or "that won't work." You stop repeating your excuses out loud, and suddenly you start hearing solutions you never noticed before. Because listening quiets your ego, and when the ego quiets, clarity rises. You begin to hear your inner voice more clearly. You begin to hear what life is guiding you toward. Some call it intuition, some call it awareness. But it's real, and it only gets louder when you get quieter. Most people ignore that voice because they're too busy explaining their pain instead of listening to what it's teaching them. But your pain is a teacher too. It speaks in lessons, not words. Every failure says, pay attention. Every disappointment says, listen closer. Every delay says, you're not ready yet. But instead of listening, most people complain. And that's why they stay stuck in the same lessons over and over again. Life will keep repeating the same test until you finally learn to listen. You've got to understand. Listening isn't just about hearing others. It's also about hearing yourself. There's wisdom inside you, but you can't access it through noise. You access it through silence. The greatest breakthroughs in life don't come from shouting louder. They come from sitting still long enough to finally hear what's been inside you all along. Have you ever noticed how inspiration often comes when you're quiet? Like when you're in the shower or walking alone or driving without music? That's not a coincidence. That's your mind finally getting a chance to breathe. That's wisdom finally having space to surface. So many people think they're stuck because life's unfair, but often they're stuck because they won't stop talking long enough to hear the direction that could set them free. When you learn to listen, you gain an advantage most people will never have: perspective. You begin to see patterns in people, in opportunities, in decisions. You begin to notice what others miss. That's what makes a great entrepreneur, a great leader, a great human being, the ability to see what's invisible to others. Listening gives you that power. I learned that every successful person I admired wasn't just a great speaker. They were great listeners first. Think about it. The best coaches, mentors, and communicators in the world know how to read the room. They know how to pause before responding. They know how to make people feel understood. That's not a gift, that's a skill. And like every skill, it can be trained. You train it by practicing silence, by resisting the urge to interrupt, by being curious instead of defensive, by asking, what can I learn from this? Instead of saying, I already know. Listening requires humility, and humility is the birthplace of growth. Ego makes you loud, wisdom makes you quiet, and the more wisdom you gain, the less you need to talk about it. That's why the truly great ones don't boast. They let their results speak, because they've learned that the quieter they become, the more they can hear what really matters. If you want to transform your life, practice what I call strategic silence. That means intentionally creating moments in your day where you just stop scrolling, stop responding, stop consuming noise, and just listen. Listen to your thoughts, to your emotions, to your surroundings. You'll be surprised how many answers you already have inside you. Listening is a mirror. It shows you what's really going on beneath the surface. And when you face that truth, you start to grow. Every successful transformation begins with awareness, and awareness begins with listening. Most people chase new tactics, new goals, new strategies, but the greatest shift you can make is internal, learning to listen before you act. When you do that, your actions become intentional, your relationships become deeper, and your success becomes sustainable, because it's built on understanding, not assumption. Listening also teaches patience, and patience is power. The reason most people fail isn't because they lack ability, it's because they can't wait. They rush, they talk, they react, they move without listening to timing. But timing is everything. A farmer doesn't dig up seeds to see if they're growing. He waits. He listens to the seasons. And that's how he gets his harvest. The same principle applies to success. When you learn to listen to life, to the rhythm, to the timing, to the feedback, you stop forcing things and start flowing with them. That's when life starts working with you instead of against you. Listening aligns you with reality. It puts you in tune with truth. And truth is the most powerful frequency there is. You can fake confidence, you can fake knowledge, but you can't fake understanding. Understanding comes from listening. And when you operate from understanding, everything you do, every decision, every move, carries power. Because it's not coming from ego. It's coming from alignment. The funny thing is, the more you listen, the less you feel the need to prove anything. You become calm, grounded, centered. You realize that wisdom doesn't shout, it whispers. And only those who are quiet enough will ever hear it. That's why some people can walk into chaos and still find clarity. They've trained themselves to listen through the noise. They don't panic. They pay attention. They don't overreact. They observe. And because they do, they lead. Listening makes you a leader, not because you talk less, but because you understand more. And in a noisy world, understanding is the ultimate advantage. There's something powerful that happens when you start truly listening. You begin to notice how much wisdom the world is trying to give you every single day. It's like you've been living in a world full of whispers, but you couldn't hear them before because you were too loud inside. When you quiet that inner noise, you start catching things you used to miss. The lessons in a stranger's story, the meaning behind a friend's silence, the guidance hidden inside your own frustrations. You realize that listening isn't just about collecting information, it's about transformation. It changes the way you see people, the way you lead, the way you live. But let me tell you the truth, listening is hard work. It's not passive. It's an active choice you have to make over and over again. Because your ego will always want to interrupt. It'll want to prove that you already know, that you're right, that you've got it figured out. But the moment you think you know everything, you stop growing. That's the trap that keeps most people average. They confuse confidence with arrogance, and in that noise, they miss the wisdom that could have taken them to the next level. You can't learn while you're defending yourself. You can't grow while you're explaining why you're stuck. You've got to let the walls down, even if it feels uncomfortable, and listen with the intent to grow, not to respond. I've learned that real listeners aren't quiet because they're shy. They're quiet because they're processing, analyzing, learning. They understand that every person, no matter who they are, carries a piece of truth that could teach them something. And that mindset creates unstoppable growth. Because when you believe everyone has something to teach you, you turn every moment into a classroom. The bus driver, the co-worker, the mentor, the child, everyone becomes your teacher. Listening keeps you humble and humility keeps you growing. I remember once attending a conference full of successful people, and there was one guy who never said much during discussions. He just sat there taking notes, nodding occasionally, fully focused. Later that day, I saw him talking privately with the keynote speaker, not talking loudly, not showing off, just listening carefully, asking simple, thoughtful questions. Months later, I found out he had built a partnership with that same speaker that transformed his business. While everyone else was trying to be impressive, he was being curious. That's the power of listening. It opens doors that confidence alone can't. Listening shows respect, and respect attracts opportunity. People love to help those who genuinely care to understand. It's like the universe itself rewards the humble learner. Because when you stop talking, you stop blocking. You create space, and that space allows success to flow in. The funny thing is, the people who talk the most about success are often the ones struggling to find it. The ones who are actually building it, they're usually quiet, focused, and observant. They're not chasing attention. They're gathering wisdom. They don't need to announce every move because they're too busy making real moves. Listening gives you clarity, and clarity gives you power. You stop chasing shiny distractions and start seeing what truly matters. You start understanding people on a deeper level, their needs, their fears, their motivations, and that understanding makes you influential. Because leadership isn't about giving more orders. It's about listening to what your team needs. Entrepreneurship isn't about talking louder. It's about listening to what the market is whispering. Love isn't about constant expression. It's about listening to what the other heart is trying to say. Listening is the foundation of every form of greatness because it connects you to reality. And when you're connected to reality, you make better decisions. You stop guessing and you start knowing. I'll tell you something. Most mistakes in life don't come from ignorance. They come from not listening. Not listening to advice, not listening to warnings, not listening to your gut. Think about how many times you've said, "Something told me not to do that," and you did it anyway. That's what I mean. That quiet voice inside you is always guiding you, but if you never slow down to listen, you'll keep walking into lessons you could have avoided. Listening to your intuition is one of the greatest success skills you can ever develop. Because your intuition is the summary of everything you've learned and experienced, it's your subconscious connecting the dots faster than logic can. But it can't speak if your mind is full of noise. You need stillness to hear it. You need silence to feel it. And once you start trusting it, you begin living in flow, where everything feels aligned, where decisions become clear, where timing feels right. Listening is not just a mental act, it's a spiritual discipline. It's how you align with your purpose. It's how you hear the subtle nudges of destiny saying, "This is the way." But the more noise you create, the more disconnected you become from that inner compass. That's why some people work so hard but still feel lost, because they're moving fast without direction. They're listening to the noise of the world instead of the whisper of their soul. The world says, Talk more, post more, show more, but your soul says, be still, observe, listen. And when you follow that voice, everything starts to make sense. You begin to see that the greatest wisdom often comes from the quietest places, from reflection, from nature, from solitude. The moments you spend alone, listening to yourself, are not wasted. They're where strength is built. Every morning, before the world gets noisy, take a few minutes of silence. Don't reach for your phone. Don't fill the air with distractions. Just listen to your thoughts, your breath, your gratitude, your goals. That small daily act can completely transform your mindset. Because when you start your day listening, you move through the world with awareness. You stop reacting impulsively. You respond with intention. And that's what separates winners from wanderers. Intentionality. Listening makes you intentional. It slows down the chaos so you can see clearly. It turns confusion into clarity, noise into knowledge, and frustration into focus. Listening makes you sharper than any motivational quote ever could. You learn to see the truth behind the words people use. You learn to sense when someone's sincere and when they're not. You learn to feel what others can't express. That emotional intelligence becomes your superpower, and it's born through listening. Success isn't just about what you say. It's about what you understand. And understanding comes only when you give your full attention. So many people lose great relationships, great jobs, and great opportunities simply because they weren't listening. They were waiting to talk. But when you listen, you build connections that last. You make people feel valued. And when people feel valued, they open up. They share ideas, insights, and opportunities. Listening makes you magnetic. Not because you're the loudest, but because you make others feel heard. People will forget what you said, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And if you make them feel heard, they'll never forget you. So if you want to lead, to inspire, to influence, learn to listen. Make it your daily practice. Every time you're tempted to interrupt, pause. Every time you feel the need to prove yourself, breathe. Every time someone speaks, treat their words like they might carry gold, because sometimes they do. Every moment you spend listening is an investment, and it pays you back in wisdom, relationships, and results. The best part is, the more you listen, the more peace you find. Because listening quiets your inner chaos. It teaches you patience. It makes you aware. It shows you that not everything needs your opinion. Sometimes silence is the most powerful answer. Sometimes not responding is how you protect your energy. Listening teaches you when to speak, when to act, and when to stay still. And that wisdom, knowing when to stay quiet and when to move, that's what creates true success. When I finally learned to stop talking and truly listen, my entire world shifted. It was as if life had been speaking to me all along, but I was too busy talking over it. I began to see how every person, every experience, even every setback, carried a message, and those messages were leading me somewhere. Listening became my superpower. It made me calmer, wiser, more patient. I started to see opportunities where I used to see obstacles. I started to understand people instead of judging them. And I realized that success isn't something you chase with noise. It's something you attract through awareness. The truth is, most people are running in circles not because they lack drive, but because they're listening to the wrong voices. They listen to fear. They listen to doubt. They listen to people who've given up on their own dreams. And that's why they can't hear the sound of their own potential. But when you stop listening to noise and start listening to truth, to your mentors, to your intuition, to life's feedback, that's when everything starts aligning. That's when the fog clears and the path becomes visible. Listening is the art of alignment. It brings your heart, your mind, and your actions into harmony. And when those three align, you become unstoppable. Because success isn't just about working harder, it's about working smarter. And you can't work smart if you're not listening. Every successful person I've ever met has mastered this balance. They know when to speak, but more importantly, they know when to listen. They know that silence isn't weakness. It's strategy. It's preparation. It's focus. Listening gives you time to observe what others miss. It helps you respond with wisdom instead of reacting with emotion. It teaches you to wait for your moment instead of forcing it. The universe rewards patience. It rewards those who are attentive, who notice the signs, who pay attention to timing. And that's what listening really is, paying attention to timing. Some people talk themselves out of blessings because they can't stop talking long enough to receive them. You've got to be quiet enough to hear opportunity knock. Sometimes that knock comes softly, in the form of a thought, a coincidence, a quiet nudge. But if your mind is too noisy, you'll miss it. That's why listening is not just a habit. It's a lifestyle. It's how you grow, how you lead, how you connect, and how you succeed. Listening makes you empathetic. It allows you to step outside your own head and see from another's perspective. It helps you handle conflict with grace. It makes you wise beyond your years. And wisdom, that's the real currency of success. You can lose money and make it back, but if you lose your ability to listen and learn, you lose everything. Because every mistake you make will repeat itself until you start listening to what it was trying to teach you. The lessons don't stop coming until you finally get quiet enough to hear them. So if you feel like life keeps teaching you the same painful lessons again and again, maybe it's not punishment. Maybe it's just a reminder that you haven't been listening. Listen to your patterns. Listen to your results. Listen to your emotions. They're all communicating something to you. Every problem you face is speaking. Every delay, every disappointment, it's life saying, pay attention here. And when you start to listen, you begin to see the message behind the mess. You stop asking, why me? And start asking, what is this trying to teach me? That shift changes everything. Listening turns frustration into education. It turns failure into feedback. It turns confusion into clarity. You begin to see that nothing in life is random. Everything is communication. The question is, are you listening? Because the truth is, success doesn't come to those who speak the loudest. It comes to those who listen the closest. It's the quiet observation that leads to the breakthrough. It's the careful reflection that leads to the innovation. It's the humble student that becomes the master. The talkers get applause for a moment. The listeners earn wisdom for a lifetime. So here's my challenge to you. Starting today, practice intentional listening. The next time someone talks to you, listen without planning your response. When life throws you a challenge, listen for the lesson instead of complaining about the problem. When your intuition whispers, don't ignore it. When silence feels uncomfortable, sit with it. Don't rush to fill it. Let it speak. Every great transformation starts in silence. The gym of the mind isn't built through noise, it's built through reflection. When you stop talking, you give your mind the space to think, to connect dots, to imagine, to create. That's why the most creative people in history all valued solitude. They weren't avoiding the world. They were listening to it in ways others couldn't. The great philosopher Epictetus said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." That's ancient wisdom, and it still holds true today. The more you listen, the more you understand. The more you understand, the more you can achieve. Listening makes you adaptable. It helps you evolve. Because the world is always changing, and if you're not listening to those changes, you'll be left behind. The loud ones resist change because they're too busy talking about how things used to be. The listeners adjust, evolve, and rise. Listening is what keeps you relevant, grounded, and ahead of the curve. And here's the most beautiful part. When you learn to listen to others, you also teach them to listen to you. Because listening is contagious. It builds connection, and connection builds trust. Trust is the foundation of every kind of success, business, relationships, leadership. You can't lead people you don't listen to. You can't inspire people you don't understand. And you can't understand people if you're always talking over them. So, slow down. Listen. Be the person who pays attention. Be the one who notices what others ignore. In a world full of noise, be the calm voice that truly hears. Because that's where real power lives, in awareness. The person who listens has the control. They're not reactive. They're not emotional. They're observant. They move strategically because they understand the landscape. Listening gives you foresight. You start to see where things are heading before others do. That's how you stay ahead. That's how you build a legacy. Because the truth is, talkers get attention, but listeners get results. Talkers argue, but listeners adapt. Talkers seek validation, but listeners seek understanding, and understanding always wins. Listening transforms relationships, careers, and entire lives. It transforms you, because when you listen deeply, you begin to see the world not just through your eyes, but through the eyes of others. That's how compassion grows. That's how wisdom grows. That's how success grows. You want to be powerful? Learn to listen. You want to be respected? Learn to listen. You want to be unforgettable? Learn to listen. Because people may not always remember what you said, but they'll never forget how it felt to be heard. And when you give that gift, the gift of presence, of attention, of understanding, You become rare. You stand out in a noisy world by being the one who's quiet enough to hear what truly matters. So, from today, make listening your discipline. Let silence be your secret weapon. Listen to the lessons life is whispering. Listen to the mentors who've walked the path before you. Listen to your heart when it tells you it's time to move. And listen when it says it's time to rest. Listen when life says, not yet, because maybe the timing isn't right. Listen when it says, now, because maybe your moment has arrived. Everything you need to know is already being communicated. You just need to get quiet enough to hear it. So stop talking and listen, because that's how you find success. Not in the noise of the crowd, but in the quiet understanding of the truth. Not in trying to prove your worth, but in listening your way to wisdom. The next time you feel lost, don't shout louder. Get still. The next time you feel stuck, don't talk your way out. Listen your way through. The answers are already around you, already within you, already waiting for you. Success has always been speaking. The question is, are you finally ready to listen?